Hello and welcome. Settle in, get comfortable, and let your imagination take the helm. Tonight, we are not just telling stories. We are embarking on a quest. We are unfurling ancient maps. We are deciphering cryptic clues. And we are stepping into the well-worn boots of the adventurer, the historian, and the dreamer. We are chasing ghosts of unimaginable wealth, of legendary and terrifying figures, and of wonders of the world that have been stolen by war and swallowed by time. There is a word, a single concept, that sets the human heart racing like few others. Treasure. It's a word that smells of salt water and old, cracking parchment, of jungle rot and the damp, metallic tang of deep earth. It conjures immediate, powerful images of chests overflowing with gold doubloons and glittering, fist-sized jewels, of secrets buried by pirates on deserted islands or hidden by conquered kings in sacred caves, waiting in the darkness for centuries to be found. The idea of lost treasure is one of humanity's oldest and most enduring fascinations. It is a universal language of adventure. But why? What is it about these stories that holds us in such a powerful grip? Is it just about the greed, the simple, intoxicating fantasy of finding a fortune that could change your life in a single, heart-stopping instant? I think it's more than that. I think the hunt for lost treasure is fundamentally a hunt for a connection to the past. Each missing fortune is a story, a tangible, physical anchor to a dramatic moment in history. A story of ambition, of conquest, of breathtaking artistry, of brutal betrayal, and of profound loss. To find the treasure is to touch that story, to hold a piece of history in your hand and feel its weight. These are not just piles of inert metal. They are the physical remnants of a forgotten world, the tangible evidence of historical secrets that time has tried to erase. Tonight, we are going to explore three of the greatest and most baffling legends in the annals of treasure hunting. These are not small, forgotten caches of coins buried by a local eccentric. These are fortunes so vast, so famous, and so maddeningly enigmatic that they have consumed the lives, and sometimes ended the lives, of those who seek them. We'll journey back to the golden age of piracy to hunt for the legacy of its most terrifying and theatrical king. We'll travel to the dizzying heights of the Andes to uncover the tragic secret behind the fall of a golden empire. And we'll plunge into the chaos and fire of World War II to search for a masterpiece of art so beautiful, so unique, that it was called the eighth wonder of the world, before it was stolen and spirited away into the fog of war. These are three stories of treasure lost. And the most compelling part, the thing that keeps these legends alive and breathing, is that, to this day, they remain lost. The maps are still open, the clues are still being debated, and the hunt is still very much on. So let's begin. Our first port of call is the treacherous, sun-drenched, turquoise waters of the Caribbean at the turn of the 18th century. This was the golden age of piracy, a brief, violent, and surprisingly democratic and anarchic period where men with colorful names like Calico Jack Rackham, Black Bart Roberts, and the ruthless Charles Vane became floating nightmares for the merchant navies of Europe. But one name stood above them all. One name became synonymous with pure, calculated, theatrical terror. A name that still echoes with fear and a strange sort of folk hero admiration. Blackbeard. His real name was likely Edward Teach or possibly Thatch. We know surprisingly little about his early life, a fact that he likely cultivated. He was probably an Englishman from Bristol who served as a privateer for the British Crown during the War of Spanish Succession. This was essentially legal piracy, where the government gave you a license to attack and plunder enemy ships. When the war ended, Teach, like thousands of other trained, violent sailors, was suddenly left unemployed. So he did what many of them did, he turned to piracy. But unlike the others, Edward Teach understood something fundamental about his new profession. He understood that, in a world of violence, The threat of violence is often more effective than violence itself. He understood that a reputation could be a more powerful weapon than any cannon. He decided to turn himself not just into a pirate, but into a brand, a monster. He meticulously crafted an image of pure, demonic fury. He was a tall, powerful man, and he grew a wild, untamed black beard that covered most of his face. A beard that he braided into small pigtails and sometimes tied with colored ribbons. But his most famous and terrifying trick was what he did before a battle. He would tuck slow-burning fuses pieces of hemp cord soaked in a mixture of saltpeter and lime water into his hat and weave them into his beard. He would light them as he went into combat. Imagine you are a sailor on a merchant ship. You see this giant, demonic figure emerging from a cloud of thick, acrid smoke. His face wreathed in fire and shadow, his eyes glowing like embers in the haze. He has a bandolier with 6 loaded pistols slung across his chest and a cutlass in each hand. It must have looked like the devil himself had come up from hell to claim your souls. And it worked. More often than not, terrified crews would surrender without a single shot being fired. His legend grew with every captured vessel. For 2 short, brutal years, from 1716 to 1718, Blackbeard was the undisputed king of the pirates, the most feared man on the seas. At the height of his power, he commanded a small fleet of ships, with his flagship being a massive, 40-gun French slave ship he had captured, La Concorde, which he proudly renamed the Queen Anne's Revenge. With this floating fortress, he achieved his most audacious act. He blockaded the entire port of Charleston, South Carolina, one of the busiest ports in the American colonies. He held the city hostage for nearly a week, demanding not gold, but a chest of medical supplies for his crew, many of whom were suffering from syphilis and other diseases. He got his medicine and sailed away, leaving the city humiliated. He plundered countless ships, accumulating a vast fortune in gold, silver, sugar, cocoa, and other valuable goods. He lived lavishly, throwing wild parties in the pirate havens of Nassau in the Bahamas and the inlets of North Carolina. But then, in May of 1718, something strange happened. The Queen Anne's Revenge ran aground and was seemingly abandoned in Beaufort Inlet, North Carolina. Blackbeard moved his most loyal men and his most valuable plunder to a smaller sloop, the Adventure, and marooned many of his remaining crew, effectively downsizing his operation. Some say the grounding was an accident. Others believe it was a deliberate act away for Blackbeard to ditch a large, unruly crew and keep a bigger share of the loot for himself and his inner circle. This act may have been a sign that he was thinking of retirement. He even accepted a royal pardon from the governor of North Carolina, a shady character named Charles Eden, who was likely on the take. But the quiet life wasn't for him. It wasn't long before he was back to his old ways. This drew the attention of the governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, who decided to put an end to Blackbeard's reign once and for all. In November 1718, he was ambushed at Ocracoke Inlet by a force of Royal Navy sailors led by Lieutenant Robert Maynard. The battle that followed was the stuff of legend. Blackbeard and his small crew fought like men possessed. Blackbeard himself took on Maynard in a one-on-one sword fight on the deck of his ship. Legend says Blackbeard fought on even after suffering 5 gunshot wounds and more than 20 severe sword cuts. He was finally brought down, his head severed from his body. Maynard hung the grisly trophy from the bowsprit of his ship as a warning to all other pirates. The legend says that when they threw his headless body overboard, it swam around the ship 7 times before finally sinking. And with his death, the real mystery began. Where was the treasure? The soldiers who captured his ship found some plunder, but nothing close to the vast fortune he was rumored to have amassed. Surely, a man as cunning and pathologically untrusting as Blackbeard wouldn't have kept all his wealth on his person or his ship. The very nature of a pirate's life was precarious. It made perfect sense to have an insurance policy, a retirement fund, buried somewhere safe, somewhere secret. The legend of his lost treasure comes directly from a story told about him by Captain Charles Johnson, a likely pseudonym for Daniel Defoe, in his 1724 book, A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates. In it, one of his crew members supposedly asked him, in a moment of drunken confidence, whether his wife knew where he had buried his money. Blackbeard is said to have replied with a cryptic, chilling smile, "That nobody but myself and the devil knows where it is, and the longest liver of us two shall take all." That single quote has fueled a treasure hunt that has lasted for 300 years. For centuries, people have scoured the shifting barrier islands of North Carolina, the cays of the Bahamas, and the wider Caribbean, digging on beaches, exploring coves, and searching for any sign of strange rock formation, an old coin off Blackbeard's legendary hoard. In 1996, the hunt got a massive, electrifying boost of credibility. A team of marine archaeologists from the private research firm Intersal Incorporated discovered a shipwreck in the shallow, murky waters of Beaufort Inlet, North Carolina. After years of painstaking, careful excavation, they confirmed it beyond a reasonable doubt. They had found the remains of Blackbeard's legendary flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. It was a monumental discovery, one of the most important pirate shipwrecks ever found. They recovered cannons, anchors, pewter plates, navigational instruments, medical supplies, and even small amounts of gold dust. It was a priceless historical find that gave us a direct, unfiltered window into the daily life of the world's most famous pirate. But it wasn't the treasure. There were no chests overflowing with coins, no giant cache of gold bars. The discovery of the ship proved the man was real and that his story was grounded in hard fact. But it only deepened the mystery of his lost fortune. If it wasn't on his main ship when it went down, where was it? His decision to abandon the Queen Anne's Revenge and move to a smaller ship now seems even more suspicious. Did he offload the treasure before the ship ran aground? The theories are endless. Some believe it's buried somewhere on Ocracoke Island, his favorite haunt. Others point to Plum Point on the Pamlico River in North Carolina, where he was known to have a home and was said to have entertained Governor Eden. Places like Amelia Island in Florida and the cays of the Bahamas are also prime candidates. Some even suggest that the treasure never really existed in a single massive hoard, that it was spent as quickly as it was stolen on rum, women, and supplies, a typical pirate lifestyle. Or, perhaps most compellingly, the treasure was just another part of the myth Blackbeard so carefully created around himself. A final piece of psychological warfare to ensure his legend would live forever, and that men would whisper his name in fear and awe for centuries to come. But for the true treasure hunter, the answer is still out there, buried in the sand, guarded by the ghost of a terrifying pirate and a secret he took to his watery grave. From the sandy shores of the Caribbean, our quest now takes us to a vastly different, almost alien world. We travel high into the clouds, to the majestic, wind-swept peaks of the Andes Mountains in South America. Here, in the early 16th century, existed one of the most sophisticated, unique, and powerful empires the world has ever known, the Inca. This was not a primitive society of scattered tribes. The Inca Empire, which they called Tawantinsuyu, the four regions together, was a marvel of social organization and breathtaking engineering. At its peak, it stretched for 2,500 miles along the spine of South America, from modern-day Colombia down to central Chile, encompassing deserts, jungles, and some of the highest mountains on Earth. It was ruled by a single absolute leader, the Sapa Inca, who was considered a living god, a direct descendant of the sun god, Inti. The empire was connected by a complex network of over 25,000 miles of paved roads, rivaling that of the Romans, with advanced rope suspension bridges spanning deep, terrifying gorges. They built magnificent cities of stone, like Machu Picchu, fitted together with such precision that not even a knife blade can be slipped between the blocks. And the Inca Empire was rich, unimaginably rich. But their relationship with gold was fundamentally different from that of the Europeans. To the Inca, gold wasn't currency. It had no monetary or economic value. It was a sacred, divine substance. Into this world of stone cities and golden gardens in 1532 came a man named Francisco Pizarro. He was a Spanish conquistador, an illiterate, hardened, ruthless, and ferociously ambitious man, and he led a tiny army of fewer than 200 men. It was a clash of worlds, an ancient, sprawling empire of millions against a handful of desperate, greedy men armed with steel armor, steel swords, war horses which the Inca had never seen and viewed as terrifying monsters, and a few primitive firearms. Through a combination of incredible luck, brazen treachery, and the devastating, unseen impact of European diseases like smallpox, which had arrived before them and had already killed the previous Sapa Inca and plunged the empire into a brutal civil war, Pizarro managed to do the unthinkable. In the northern city of Cajamarca, he lured the newly victorious Sapa Inca, Atahualpa, into a trap in the main square. In a stunningly swift and brutal attack, the Spanish, with their thundering guns and charging horses, slaughtered thousands of Atahualpa's lightly armed retainers and captured the living god himself. The capture of the Sapa Inca sent a shockwave of confusion and paralysis through the entire, rigidly hierarchical empire. Seeing the Spaniards' insatiable, feverish lust for gold and silver, the imprisoned Atahualpa made one of the most famous and tragic bargains in history. In a desperate bid for his freedom, he offered a ransom. A king's ransom in the most literal sense of the term. He stood in a large room, roughly 22 feet long by 17 feet wide, and promised to fill it once with gold, as high as he could reach. Pizarro, stunned, agreed to the terms, and so the order went out across the vast empire. From every temple, every palace, and every shrine, a river of gold began to flow towards Cajamarca. For months, Inca subjects, heartbroken at the capture of their god, dutifully stripped their holiest sites. They brought intricate golden statues, ceremonial masks, fine jewelry, plates, goblets, and heavy sheets of gold that had adorned the temple walls. It was one of the greatest collections of wealth and priceless art ever assembled in one place in human history. The Spanish, caring nothing for the artistry or the sacred nature of the objects, simply melted it all down into crude bars for easier transport and division. But Francisco Pizarro was a man without honor. After receiving the vast majority of the ransom, an amount of gold and silver that would make every one of his men fantastically wealthy, he saw that the living Atahualpa was a threat. He was more valuable to him dead than alive. So, Pizarro trumped up a series of false charges including treason and idolatry, and in 1533, he had the Sapa Inca publicly executed by garrote. And this is where the legend of the lost treasure truly begins. The story, passed down through the centuries, goes that a huge portion of the ransom, a final, massive shipment of gold, silver, and priceless artifacts, was still on its way to Cajamarca when news of Atahualpa's treacherous execution reached the caravan. The general leading this procession, a fierce and loyal Inca warrior named Rumiñahui, was enraged by the betrayal. He refused to let the last of his people's sacred heritage fall into the hands of the treacherous, oath-breaking Spanish. And so, he took the vast caravan, laden with an untold fortune in gold, and diverted it from the main Inca road. He led it deep into the trackless, forbidding mountains and, according to legend, hid it all. The treasure has never been seen again. This isn't the gold Pizarro melted down. This is the portion that got away. A treasure so vast it could dwarf what the Spanish actually received. The hunt for the ransom of Atahualpa, often called the treasure of the Langanates, has been a siren song for adventurers, explorers, and madmen for nearly 500 years. The most famous clues point to the Langanates mountain range in modern-day Ecuador. This is not a friendly place. It's a green hell, a perpetually cloud-shrouded, rain-soaked wilderness of treacherous, razor-sharp mountains, bottomless bogs, and dense, disorienting jungle where the visibility can drop to zero in an instant. It's a place where explorers are said to go mad from the isolation and the constant hardship, a place where people simply vanish without a trace. The local people say the mountains are cursed, protected by the angry spirits of the Inca. The legend is fueled by a semi-mythical guide, a map in text form, known as Valverde's Derrotero. The story is that a Spaniard named Valverde was led to the treasure by his Inca father-in-law and became incredibly wealthy. On his deathbed, he wrote a detailed, cryptic guide to lead others to the site, which he then gave to the King of Spain. The guide speaks of a black lake, a great waterfall, a place called the mouth of the mountain, and a man-made tunnel inside a cave where the treasure is hidden. Many have tried to follow its cryptic instructions. All have failed and some have died trying. So where is it? Is it still hidden in a sealed cave in the Langanates, waiting for someone brave, foolish, or lucky enough to find it? Was it divided and scattered across the Andes? Or was it found long ago by locals and secretly spirited away? Or perhaps the most tragic possibility is that the story of the hidden caravan is just a myth, a tale of defiance and hope created by a conquered people in their darkest hour. Whatever the truth, the lost ransom of a fallen god-king remains one of the most potent, alluring, and tragic of all historical secrets. Our final story takes us from the ancient world and the age of sail into the heart of the 20th century's darkest conflict. This is not a story of gold coins in a chest or bullion bars in a cave. This is a story of a singular work of art, a masterpiece of human creation so magnificent, so breathtakingly beautiful, that it was rightly and without hyperbole called the eighth wonder of the world. This is the story of the Amber Room. To understand what was lost, you must first picture it. Imagine walking into a large, stately room in a grand European palace. But this room is like nothing you have ever seen. The walls are not painted, or wallpapered, or covered in silk. They are covered, from floor to ceiling, in immense, intricate panels of pure, luminous amber. Over 6 tons of it. The amber panels are of 100 different shades, from milky white and egg yolk yellow to honey gold and deep, blood red. They are carved with exquisite, microscopic detail, forming intricate mosaics, garlands of flowers, and the Prussian coat of arms. They are backed with gold leaf, so that when light from the chandeliers or the windows hits them, the entire room seems to glow with a warm, magical, inner fire. The effect is framed by giant mirrors designed to create an infinite reflection, gilded carvings of cherubs, and mosaics made of other precious and semi-precious gemstones. It was more than a room. It was a giant, walk-in jewel box, a masterpiece of Baroque art that had no equal on earth. Its story begins in the early 18th century, a time of shifting alliances and grand artistic ambition in Europe. It was originally designed and constructed for Frederick I, the first king of Prussia, to be installed in his palace in Berlin. But in 1716, as a symbol of the new alliance between Prussia and Russia against their mutual enemy, Sweden, Frederick's son gave the still unassembled room as a magnificent diplomatic gift to the Russian Tsar, Peter the Great. Peter was astounded by its beauty. The Russians expanded and embellished it over the years, eventually installing it in the Catherine Palace, the glittering summer residence of the Tsars in the town of Tsarskoye Selo, just outside St. Petersburg. And there it remained for nearly 200 years, the literal jewel in the crown of the Romanov dynasty, dazzling all who saw it. Then came June 1941. Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the massive, brutal invasion of the Soviet Union. As the German army blitzed eastward at terrifying speed, the curators at the Catherine Palace grew frantic. They knew the Nazis had a special unit, the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, or ERR, tasked with the systematic looting of Europe's greatest cultural treasures for Hitler's planned Führermuseum. They tried to disassemble the amber room to evacuate it to safety. But the amber, a delicate organic fossil, had become dry and brittle over the centuries. As they tried to remove the panels, they began to crumble and break. With the roar of German tanks just miles away, they made a desperate last-ditch decision. They tried to hide it in plain sight. They covered the magnificent, glittering walls with simple wallpaper, gauze and cotton, hoping the Nazi soldiers would be fooled into thinking it was an ordinary room and would simply pass it by. It was a naive and futile gesture. The Nazis knew exactly what they were looking for. They arrived at the palace, tore down the pathetic wallpaper, and within 36 hours, their team of experts had carefully disassembled the entire amber room. They packed its priceless panels into 27 large crates and shipped them west, back to Germany. They triumphantly installed it in Königsberg Castle, in what was then the German province of East Prussia. The city of Königsberg was, poetically, the very city where the room had first been conceived. It was a symbolic and triumphant act of cultural theft, the ultimate spoil of war. And for 2 years, from 1942 to 1944, it was put on display for Nazi officials and visiting dignitaries. Then, in late 1944, the tide of the war turned completely. Königsberg was heavily, mercilessly bombed by the British Royal Air Force. The ancient city was devastated by massive firestorms. In the final, chaotic months of the war, as the Red Army closed in from the east, the amber room vanished. In April 1945, the Soviets captured what was left of the city. When they stormed Königsberg Castle to reclaim their stolen treasure, they found nothing. The eighth wonder of the world had disappeared from the face of the earth, and it has been missing ever since. Its disappearance is one of the greatest unsolved art heists and historical mysteries of World War II. What happened to it in those chaotic, fiery final months of the war? The theories are numerous, complex, and passionately debated. The first and most simple is that it was destroyed. It was still in the castle when the British bombers struck, and it was consumed by the fires that gutted the building. Amber is just fossilized tree resin. It burns ferociously. This is the official Russian government position and the explanation favored by most sober historians. It's the most likely explanation, but for many, it feels too simple, too anticlimactic, too mundane for such a legendary and magical treasure. The second theory, the one that fuels the treasure hunters, is that it was packed away and hidden before the bombing. As the Red Army approached, the Nazis, under the direction of the infamous art looter Erich Koch, crated the room up again and moved it for safekeeping. But to where? This is where the real treasure hunting begins. Some believe it was loaded onto a ship, perhaps the infamous passenger liner Wilhelm Gustloff, which was sunk in the frigid Baltic Sea by a Soviet submarine in January 1945, with a massive loss of life. It was one of the greatest maritime disasters in history. For decades, divers have searched the wrecks of the Baltic, hoping to find 27 waterlogged crates of amber. Others believe it was moved inland and hidden in one of the thousands of secret underground mines or bunkers that the Nazis used to hide their plunder. The search has focused on sites all across Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Austria. Every few years, a new story emerges. A radar scan has detected a hidden, man-made chamber in an old salt mine. A deathbed confession from a former SS soldier has revealed its location. A cryptic note is found in a diary. Each lead creates a flurry of media excitement, but each has, so far, led to a frustrating dead end. There's even a darker, more conspiratorial theory that the Soviets themselves actually found the room or parts of it in the ruins of Königsberg. But for some unknown, complex political reason, perhaps to use it as a bargaining chip in the nascent Cold War, or perhaps because Joseph Stalin was angry it had been allowed to be captured in the first place, they hid the discovery and secretly stored it away, its location still a state secret buried deep in some forgotten Kremlin vault. The search for the Amber Room has become a modern obsession, and a strangely dangerous one at that. A number of people connected to the hunt, from amateur treasure hunters to former intelligence officers who claim to know its location, have died under mysterious circumstances over the years, leading to whispers of a curse. Today, if you visit the Catherine Palace, you can see the Amber Room. But it's a replica, a stunning, painstaking reconstruction that took Russian artisans over 2 decades and cost millions of dollars to complete. Finally unveiled in 2003. It is a testament to the skill of modern craftsmen and a powerful tribute to the greatness of what was lost. But it is also a constant, glittering reminder that the original, the real eighth wonder of the world, is still out there somewhere. A ghost of amber and gold, waiting, perhaps, to be found. So there we have it. A pirate's cryptic riddle, a god-king's sacred ransom, and a lost wonder of the artistic world. 3 legendary treasures, separated by centuries and continents, all united by one simple, tantalizing fact: they are still missing. These stories endure not just because of the immense monetary value of what was lost, but because of the powerful human drama that is inextricably woven into them. They are stories about hubris, faith, betrayal, art, and the chaotic, destructive forces of history. The absence of these treasures has created a vacuum, a void that we have filled with legends, theories, and a persistent, unquenchable hope that one day, a lucky explorer, a diligent researcher, or just a person in the right place at the right time will solve the puzzle. The hunt for lost treasure is, in the end, a hunt for resolution, for the final chapter of a story that ended too abruptly. But now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 3 great historical secrets captivates you the most? What do you think happened to these incredible lost treasures? Do you believe Blackbeard's fortune is a myth he created? Or is it still buried somewhere in the shifting Carolina sands? Is the Inca gold protected by an ancient curse in the mountains of Ecuador? And where do you think the Amber Room ended up, destroyed by fire, sunk at the bottom of the sea, or hidden away in a secret Nazi bunker? Let me know your theories and which treasure you believe is most likely to one day be found. Share your thoughts and your own research in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world's greatest lost treasures and historical secrets, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the unknown. Your support is what makes it possible to continue these quests into the mysteries of our past. Thank you for joining me tonight. Remember that history is not a closed book. It is full of mysteries, and the world is full of secrets still waiting to be uncovered. The maps may be lost, the witnesses may be long dead, and the trail may be cold. But for those who are willing to look, the hunt is eternal. Sleep well,